Oops, forgot the Eve music was on. Welcome to Today in EVE Online. We're going to look at the forums and look what's at other news sources and talk about what is going on in EVE Online today. Thanks for joining me. In here with me is McLeod.
Hello.
And as I said before, you sound just like Seamus. I remember he used to, except sometimes he would squawk and it would be like a bird, but it was really loud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Miss that guy. We're going to have him around a bit more. He's a little bit busy right now, but when he comes back, I want to definitely utilize that guy because if you don't know Seamus, he's an amazing guy from Eve University, one of the instructors there, one of the professors, and he very much is a professorly character. Full of knowledge and knowledge that has blown me away, like stuff that I had no concept of. Like, I don't even know how to describe this, but I intend to learn it better. But he mapped out all the funnels in EVE Online, all the funnels that a person would need to go through in order to get to a certain system. And so that kind of information is, first of all, I don't even know how you get it. But second, it really shows all the choke points of travel in EVE Online. So for a pirate, that would be amazing information to say, like, well, here are all the pipes. These are the places to go and stake out to try to kill some freighter going by and take its stuff. Anyway, that is Seamus. His mind works that way. And someday I'll show you that image that has the whole map and all the pipes mapped out. It's pretty amazing. Okay, it is September 6th. And I was just looking at what the headlines might be for today, and was looking for battles and didn't see much. Probably the thing that's getting the biggest reaction right now inside of Talking in Stations is Olmeca's comments earlier. Olmeca, if you don't know, is part of CSM. CSM is the council that people are... No. CSM is the Council of Stellar Management. It's for representatives of the player base to the company so that the players can have some say-so in the proposals that EVE... Actually, that may be too strong a way to put it. There's basically three things a CSM does. One is they give feedback on stuff that has been launched. So CCP will launch mechanic changes or adjustments or balance passes, whatever, features. CSM comes back and says, yeah, the people like it or don't like it, or this is what I'm hearing from my constituency. The other thing it does is it is shown proposals for things that they're going to launch. And they weigh in on whether they think that is good for the game or not. And it doesn't mean they have any decision ability. They only have persuasive influence, which for some devs works, and for other devs it doesn't work. So there's always a lot of frustration coming out of CSM because they don't feel heard, or they do feel heard. If they feel heard, it's a big deal and they celebrate it. If they feel like they're being ignored, then they feel like it's a waste of their time to fly to Iceland to sit down and to do this quality control checking. And that's how it works. So one of the characters that made it this year into CSM, disclosure, I ran for CSM and didn't make it. Olmeca Gold ran for CSM and did make it. And he actually had an amazing showing where he had something like 3,000 votes right off the bat. That's like in the first round. And that put him basically as the third most popular CSM to be voted in. And one caveat, you'd think that people are voting for other people, and that is true. But one person's vote does not equal another person's vote in this system. The voting power is given to the accounts. So one person can vote one time because they have one account, and one person can vote 500 times because they pay for 500 accounts. And that's a distortion of an actual democracy. So what you have in EVE Online in order to win elections is you have this massive bundling that goes on. And so an alliance will bundle their votes and say, we want all of you to vote for our guy, and here's our guy. And that's usually a reward for somebody who's trusted and hopefully knowledgeable in the game, but it's usually a kind of reward. The leaders of the alliances get to decide if they're going to take the CSM seat or not. And if they're not, they get to give it to someone they like and trust and maybe want to reward for their activity in the alliance. So how you get the candidates is a little bit
If I can interject really quick,
Sure.
that's one of the reasons why they don't allow alphas to vote, because anyone could make 1,000 accounts and vote with 1,000 different characters.
Yeah. And there have been cases where people have turned on, I think Bobman actually, he lit up or paid for 100 accounts so he could give himself 100 votes. And that worked for him. He got in to CSM. There was
I
100 more
I
than he had.
remember I remember 2 years ago, the judge was sitting in a MAR local and offering people 50 million for each of their vote.
Yes. Straight out buying
Well,
votes.
Yeah, he was
there's
straight
been
out
people.
advertising in local for
Yeah.
it.
There's been people who have done even more, sort of like who've offered more for votes. I remember back in the day, Darius 3 of Brick Squad fame, he would basically strike conversations with people in low sec and high sec, asking them for votes in the upcoming CSM elections, and promise them 30 days of game time.
I think that guy got thrown off
He
too.
never gave it. Sorry?
I think Darius 3 got thrown off of CSM as well.
He did for various different reasons, but he still got on there.
Yeah, he did.
Probably including some people who thought that they were actually going to get game time from him, but never did.
Sure.
So
Right. So that's the system. The system is a little bit strange because if you're looking for player feedback and you want to have the trappings of a democratically elected council, this is flawed, although not fatally flawed. It's just not a perfect system. And I'm not sure you could find a perfect system, but you might be able to find a better system if you had players vote through their account, even if they had multiple accounts. Because right now there is a power struggle that is evident in the composition of the council. The council is essentially 7/10 or 8/10. That means 8 out of 10 nullsec power block representatives. And you have maybe 9/10 PvP oriented. So that is because the people who are most active in voting have bundled the votes to bring themselves into the council. That is not representative of all the players, of course. And I think that is why CCP will take in CSM feedback and take it seriously, because clearly you have advanced players and players that represent other players, but not necessarily the majority or all of the players. And so I think CSM is one avenue that CCP uses to get information. It certainly isn't the only avenue. So one of the people that is not part of the block who actually ran against the blocks is Omega Gold. Now he got in, I'm sure, with some help from votes that were paid for, which is totally fine in the confines of what the system is right now. It ethically may not be okay, but it is part of the system, and nobody doubts that it's legitimate. But he was also a darling of Reddit, which has an audience of about, it seems to me, like 3,000. Well, maybe it's 3,000 active and people lurk. Who knows how many people, but he made a video about whaling. And that's basically taking on big ships, usually industrial, and destroying them or dismantling them or stealing from them. It's kind of a Robin Hood character, except he doesn't give any of the money away that I know of. He just kind of steals from the rich kind of thing. But he was very much, his platform was very much against, or his ideas were very much against the power structures that benefit from the current system. In other words, the big null blocks that are able to benefit from the way things are. And there was a big debate on, with him getting in, especially having such a strong showing, if there was going to be calamity at the CSM. Would the null leaders that were there reject him, isolate him, or would they embrace him, or who knew what was going to happen? And so the summit has just ended. And the first thing we hear, well, not the first thing, but one of the things we hear from Olmeca is that he has a lot of confidence in the way it went. But he does more than that. He actually vouches for the people who were there. Let's see if we can actually find that vouch. I think it's here. It starts out with this. I'm exhausted at the end of the 4th day, but the productivity of the summit was worth it. We melted a lot of prejudice between null, CSM, and I can in good conscience say they aren't metagaming to pursue their in-game self-interest. And he goes on to answer himself here. I came here claiming null was overrepresented in the CSM. The claim still stands, but it turns out to be a background issue rather than an issue of self-interest metagaming. Still, there is a huge value in at least having one person representing Eve hunters, or hunters of Eve, coming from that background. So what he's just said is, all right, I came here thinking that the null characters were all going to represent their own alliance, and that isn't the case.
Biased.
Yeah, and have bias. That isn't the case. And at least it was a good idea to have one hunter that isn't a part of those blocks. And I want you to think about that for a second. He's saying, oh yeah, they're not biased. It's still a problem, but they're not biased for their stuff. And it's a good idea that we had someone like me that wasn't a part of them to balance it out. Now remember, there are 2 layers here. One is nullsec and non-nullsec, which is about 8-2. But then you have PvP, which Olmeca is a part of. And that is 9 to maybe 1. There's one guy, Steve Rnukin, who's an outlier in that sense. He doesn't PvP that I know of, and he's more of an independent industrialist and third-party developer. An all-around nice guy.
Well, I would potentially argue that maybe Arath is also someone who doesn't really actively PvP that much, although, he is clearly part of a group that does.
Exactly, that's what I meant. It's not about their personal preference of game style. It's the preference of the built-in expectations that I'm saying, which I think he addresses in the next one. It says, "I'm leaving the summit optimistic but semi-worried for our beloved game. There are possible pathways for this game to get back on track of organic growth. There are also pathways in which it can deteriorate. All I can say is the CSM did its job, and the ball is in CCP's court." And then he gets congratulated by Brisk, who says, "I'm glad you finally realized what we've been telling you for years." And then Olmeca defends himself by saying, well, there are nuance issues here. I still think null is overrepresented, and you can't fully represent a playstyle without that activity being the thing you mainly care about. And that is a key point.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pando gets in here too. Some call Pandorolica, who comes around, it says, some called you the meme candidate, and I have to admit, I expected an edgy kid just trying to get into Goon's face, but I'm glad I was wrong. These are mature thoughts of someone who cares about the game with a unique perspective. So I'm happy you made it into the CSM! ! And
I'm happy that Initiative supported him.
Yeah, Initiative did Initiative support him?
To some degree, yeah, I think so.
So did PL.
We were looking around for candidates that were what we would consider to be the underdogs, and I think he ended up being on the shortlist in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. All right, so that's that. I think, to me, it seems like if he thought ever that people go there and represent their alliance per se, that that was an immature thought process to begin with. People don't go into the CSM and say like, I'm going to figure out how to get my team more of this and more of that, at least on the surface, right? I think by improving the game, most of those guys are going to benefit in some way, right? If the game is healthy, their groups are happy and healthy. And if their groups are happy and healthy, they stay important. They stay in power. So the idea is to keep the game happy and healthy. The problem I've always had, and I think he sees this too, but maybe not as much, is that there's a lot of implicit bias in the game styles that you enjoy and support. And that's the thing that is going to pepper, or it's going to give that perspective to the kind of answers that you give to CCP. That's why diversity is important in most situations, if not all situations. It's because you need different people from different backgrounds to bring in their innate, built-in, and experienced perspectives, and that widens up the possibility of progress for everyone, instead of just progress for a group that feels a certain way about certain things. Talk to any nullsecker, and there's a lot of things that are given, like that's just a reality. You'll hear him say, that's what Eve is. And those are, anytime you hear like, that's just the way Eve is, or that's very Eve, or this or that, there is an implicit suggestion that they know the truth about EVE Online and what it's supposed to be like and how it's supposed to be played. And everything that the company does should really foster that. And I think that's something that you should be aware of when you're trying to get information from someone. Okay. What else have we got? Oh, and in before, Aerith says that he mind controlled Olmeca and totally meted him into compliance, etc., etc., etc. One other thing I wanted to look at is, what the heck is Hilmar pointing at here? This is very interesting, and I would like to know what that looks like. So SP, I think, skill points. Maybe P is progress. I don't know what E stands for, but it would be interesting to know. When we had Hilmar on, he talked about the some of the progress and how you're supposed to make things harder for people who play the game more intensely and that sort of thing. So maybe he's talking about that. I don't know. This to me looks like it could be when people are progressing towards something, and then when they decide that they've achieved it and are on their way out. I don't know, but it would be interesting to know. There's Hilmar talking to the CSM, and you can see the CSM is listening intently. Over here, you have the creative director, CCP Berger, and then you have the CSM there at the table paying attention. If anybody recognizes what that graph actually represents, I'd like to know. Ooh, MSR and MER out for August 2019. Let me check that out. Thank you for that tip, Exxon. That's TIS staff for you on the ball. It looks like it just came out, so we'll check it out.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Well, it's not in operations. I expected a link. Maybe it's in public. Well, we have
in sourced headlines.
What's that?
It's in sourced headlines channel.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's where all our news is supposed to go. That's probably where I should have looked first, but I was hinted at. So sourced headlines, and there should be a little summary there if it's done right. Yep. Well, no, there's not a summary. There should be a little summary there. So we'll do that in a bit. But here it is. Let's go to it right now. Justin. Monthly economic report in August. See, and was I complaining about having nothing to talk about this morning?
Right.
I tell you what, you say your prayer and the gods deliver.
But now I need to launch the stream so I can see what you're looking at.
All right. So the first things it says is, well, let's read it. Let's see if I can read it this way. If this is terrible, I'll stop.
Hello wonderful capsulers and welcome to the monthly security report for August 2019, where we take a look over the month's activity against botting, RMT and account hacking.
Ooh, account hacking. All right, so account hacking is 994 accounts were, account bans. That means people were banned. So 994 accounts were hacked and banned. And there have been 4,300 accounts banned for activities. Is that in this month alone? Oh, no, these numbers represent action taken between, 1 month
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah. Oof.
That's a lot of botters taken out, right?
That's a lot of butters considering they have no local.
Gone temporarily, because the trend will be that they will just roll a new character.
All right, let's talk about the facts, right? 4,300. Now, they were probably more discoverable. I'd like to see how that compares to previous MERs because they were probably more discoverable after the changes. You know, trying to work in the situation, they were probably easier to detect and destroy. You also had 2,400 accounts for bans for RMT. Again, I would like to see those botting numbers compared to previous months and see if that's bigger than usual.
I have the July numbers if you want them.
Sure.
301 bans for account hacking, 777 for botting, 1,023 for RM.
700 last month compared to 4,300 this month. That is a huge, huge difference.
That means when blackout hit, their program still didn't work, so they stopped playing, and now they have adapted. That's why we are seeing 4,000 being banned.
I think the thing is, CCP probably had inklings of certain people potentially, botting, and so when blackout hit, they saw a downturn in the activity and then an upturn afterwards, and they were able to basically laser focus on them and see if the because if you're botting, then you're using a program, and if programs need to adapt and change, then generally they tend to adapt in kind of similar fashions, and because of that, the sort of behavior of the bot would be very similar, and identifiable. Let's put it that way.
Well, whatever's happening, they managed to, what is that? Almost quintuple their rates of accounts being banned. That's CCP doing a massive amount of banning this last month, a massive amount compared to months before. And I'd like to know how and why, if there's a difference. But we do know the environment for bots to operate in has changed, and I think it's made them easier to detect. Possibly, I don't know. We'll see. All right. So current focus. For the last month, our focus has been on smashing several botting and RMT rings that have been reported to us by the community. There's a clue. As well as monitoring the behavior of suspected botters after the start of the blackout. And that's what I just said. The environment has changed and made it easier for them to detect. To see if and how the methods used are adapting to the changes that we have made. So maybe they are catching them. That's the end of the quote. Maybe CCP is catching them because they can see where they go and what they start to do afterwards. Is that what you just said, McLeod?
To some degree.
Okay. So they have their eye on them. They make the environment untenable for them. And then they watch them move to, say, high sec and start to do some of the same things they did before. And at that point, they can determine a bit better that these guys are actually not playing the game. They're just cheating on it. Perhaps. That's some of the stuff. But we do know the community reported people. They kept their eye on them. They also kept their eye on people who were adapting to blackout.
There was also, I don't generally tend to sort of like to use Reddit as a bastion of truth and honesty kind of thing, but there were a few posts sort of fairly recently as well on that saying, with the productive individuals in Eve basically going through lists of like corporations and alliances leaving certain nullsec groups and suddenly appearing in high sec and doing what could potentially be illicit activity, aka botting, which could have been fairly helpful for CCP, but definitely shows the same trend that CCP is talking about is a noticeable thing just on just on the data that we get from the game.
One thing this tells me, we were going to say something, Bard Ghost?
No, sorry.
Okay.
McLeod addressed it there.
All right. Well, another thing is that people have been looking at the peak concurrent players stat, and they've said it's gone down. And sure, it has. There's another game out right now that is wildly popular, Classic WoW Classic. But in addition to that, before that ever hit, there was a dip, and I wonder if 4,000 bans on botting would be a part of that. I think it would be a major part of that.
It won't be major. It'll be a minor part of it, because you got to consider that the bots will be split out per time zone and such. It will contribute.
Well, I think
it
bots
doesn't explain it.
Bots kind of turn on and stay on. So.
If you want them to get caught, you run them for 24 hours. If you're sensible, you run for 4 to 6 hours a time and cycle them through.
Okay, so but 4,000 would definitely make a dent in PCU, I imagine, right? You can.
If you split it through on 6-hour shifts, that's about a 1,000 drop in PCU. If you look.
Well, I'm not going to do that because we don't know if everybody is sensible and turns them on and off every 6 hours. A lot of people turn them on and leave them on, I think, trying to maximize their income. Especially
it's entirely possible that the people who decided to turn them back on and, had them in high school probably thought that maybe they could turn them on like almost indefinitely because they're in high sec.
Right. And that's what MDK Wow says. Bots probably get reported quicker in high sec than in null because there's more traffic, and that makes a lot of sense. Let's continue reading here. We'll be very interested to see this is CCP again, back to the dev blog. We'll be very interested to see what level impact there would be on botting activities with the release of the sinusoidal field changes. Sinusoidal change. I always say sorial. Sinusoidal changes. With the September release on Tuesday, and that should be happening. Is that any day now, or is that next week? No, that's next week. I'm sorry, I thought it was Tuesday. As well as the venture changes, which we hope will have a substantial effect on low sec faction warfare botting. I guess there's botting in all kinds of places. Continuing with the dev blog, we can see by looking at the graph below, the combination of the blackout as well as renewed focus on hammering these kinds of illicit behaviors into the ground have had a massive impact on the amount of ISK being poured into the economy of New Eden by suspected botters. Let's see if we can get a closer look at that graph. Yeah, look at that hammer. So you had, if you're just looking at botting income, you're seeing it completely get quashed. I'll dip down here. It went from at the maximum 400 billion, I imagine. I don't know what the time frame is on that. Is that per day? Seems it could be.
I think each block is a week.
It does appear to be something like 8 days, 7 or 8 days. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the gaps, though, right? But the plot points are going to be days then, because there's probably 8 points inside of that space. So let's say this is daily 400 billion a day, down to 300 billion. Then in July, back up to. This is interesting. Back up to about 400 billion. What happened between June and July? Between the middle of June and the beginning of July. Wasn't that the tribute war?
Could have been something to do with that.
That's very interesting because a couple things happen here. One is, the North ran into some problems because the Imperium came up and quashed them in tribute, took away their territory. The North abandoned the territory. So you have a disruption in two ways. You have the North being disrupted, clearly, because they've been displaced. You also have the Imperium not at home, so nobody was mining at that time. And if that's the case, you lost 100 billion at that point in botting income. And it makes you wonder. What's that?
Sorry, just a quick correction. Suspected botting is the term they keep using.
Okay.
Because it doesn't count to this graph if they haven't identified it and banned it.
Well, if they've
which would
identified
explain
it,
what's missing.
If they've identified it and banned it, and then it's on this graph, right?
Yes.
So then it's no longer suspected.
I'm going to say they're using that as a cover rule.
Oh, okay.
Just in case they've wrongfully banned a few people in there.
Yeah. So what you have here is a drop 100 billion, which gives you an idea of what possibly was interrupted at that time. Was it the Imperium botters, or was it Northern botters, or was it other groups at that time? Because that's what was going on with this dip here. And then when it's over, you can see that pretty much about when it's over. I could be wrong about these dates, but the beginning of July, or right before the beginning of July, you have it returned back to about 350 billion. And here's the thing. Then blackout hits. Well, drifters hit, and you see a massive dip here, because I think drifters hit, early July, within the first week of July? Am I mistaken? I would have to look. But there's a dip there. Something happened. It could have been drifters. It could have been something else. But by, I would say, July, 12th? You have an absolute squashing of that botting income. And I believe that's darkness, right? Or blackout. Someday I'll get it right. Blackout.
Again, assuming it's all banned. That's only what they've banned, right? It could just be that they're not identifying stuff.
Well, it could be more. It could be that there's a lot of people who got away with it too.
Yeah.
But that's a 400 billion per day habit just wiped out. I think it's not wiped out. It's still, you could see it down here. It was still carrying on after the blackout. There's some daring people or people who just didn't care. And they were making about 500 million a day, which is not nothing. If you think about that, think about your own situation, 500 million a day. So yeah, that's a huge, huge win for people who don't like bots.
There is one other iffy thing with this graph, sorry, Matt, as well. It is missing mining amounts.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've lumped it into other or what, but it's missing mining amounts that's being then.
Oh, we couldn't see this part here. Let's see what that is. It says here on the right-hand side, I'm sorry, it was off screen, but so 12 billion were combat sites in SOV space. And I don't know what 12 billion, that's lately, because it's a total.
Yes.
No, that's not a total.
That's the recent week, I guess.
No,
because there's no way like the 400 bill back then was.
Yeah, I don't know what that number is.
Yeah, it might just be the latest amounts, considering the size of the graph. Like, 12 billion wouldn't really register in any way, shape, or form like that much at all on that graph. So if you look at the numbers right at the end of the graph, like,
you're right,
that's probably some kind of numerical example, numerical kind of readout of like that last little bit.
You're both exactly right. I'm sorry. I got confused and thought we were talking in terms of millions. So when I said earlier that it's been quashed to 500 million, if I said that, that's not true. It's 50 billion as opposed to 400 billion. And if you're looking at the chart on the right, that's what that seems to represent. So I'll just read that. That's combat sites in sovereignty, 12 billion. Missions, 14 billion. Incursions, 13 billion. Combat sites, 4 billion. Other, 1 billion. Insurance, 5 billion. Project discovery, 500 million. So the majority of the botting that recently got banned, I imagine, is combat sites and sovereignty, which is basically ratting, right? Ratting and sov. Missions and incursions. Incursions are way up there, along with missions. Now, what's a combat site? Is that an anomaly? Because that is a
I'm
Typically,
I'm going to assume high sec combat anoms.
Yeah, right.
Because
yeah.
because we have two combat sites, right? We have the combat site sovereignty, which I'm going to assume it's null sec anoms, and then we have combat sites, which is ISEC or Empire anoms.
it could also be NPC as well, because you have like big regions like Venal that, although it's not sovereignty space, people do still run, sites
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Yes.
NPC anoms.
So Exxon Fang says, "Whoa, wait! People are botting Project Discovery, and that's amazing, and it is amazing. I haven't heard of that.
How is that even possible?
Yeah, Project Discovery, botting Project Discovery. Hey, at least it's a good cause, right? But I want to point out that the majority of stuff that's happening in, say, high sec, because we assume combat sites are high sec combat sites, if not low sec, but basically non-sov combat sites,
Yeah,
is
Empire.
1/4 what it was even a few days ago in sovereign space. So when you make the accusation that Sov has been closed down and all these botters didn't disappear, they all moved to high sec, I think that doesn't work with these numbers. Am I wrong about that?
Again, this is just what they've caught.
This is just what they've caught, so there may be more
If
out
people
there.
are transitioning over, then they will probably be using new forms of bots that CCP doesn't know how to detect yet.
Okay, so
and thus will slip under the radar for a while.
all right.
So give it a month or two, and maybe stuff will start showing.
In a month or
thing is
two,
this
people will
graph, right?
forget. People will forget what was said. And that's
Yeah,
the problem.
and the other thing is mining is missing from the list. This is just what is being force-sitted in.
Right.
So mining could have jumped sky high. Just CCP's not showing us that.
I just wanted to kind of clarify something about the graph, right? The graph is based on people who have been caught, right? I'm kind of there thinking to myself, like, well, if they haven't been caught, they don't show on the graph, right? If they have been caught, they do. So it is basically charting the history of charting the history of ISK being made by people who've been caught. So I would assume that the big reduction is probably something to do with obviously with the blackout kind of thing.
Well,
If that means that they moved over to high sec and then got caught, then that would also show on the graph, right?
okay, so mining, let's go look at mining here.
They do have mine.
Yeah, well, this is a monthly economic report. It's not going to be the security report.
Oh, okay, right.
All right. Wow, the thing that jumps out the most is just, and I don't know if I can get to this picture. I think I can get to it here. I think so, yes. Is the massive slump at the end here. I think you can just see this since. Let's see if I can make that a bit bigger. Yeah, you have July, August, September is really what we're looking at, right? And the trend continues to go down for stuff that's produced. The stuff that's destroyed also dips down a little bit. I think it's still within its realm of going up and down seasonally and monthly. And it looks like, what's that yellow? Stuff that is mined. Here's the tribute war, right? That huge dip is the tribute war, because most people who are mining a lot either are displaced or displacing other people. They're at war. And so you see the mining kind of come to a halt. And then when that war is over, it shoots right back up to where it was. Like within 2 weeks, it's right back to where it was. And then darkness hits and you see it go down. And it seems to have stabilized down here. Let's see what that amount is. Under $1 trillion, just under $1 trillion. That's still a lot of mining being done, but we haven't seen
Merrill.
Hey, we haven't seen those levels since 2017. Oh, it's interesting. I have to compare that to the other stuff. What's going on, Prometheus? Or Seraph, sorry.
We can't see what you're talking about on the screen. We can only see like the top third of the graph.
Oh, you're right. Hold on.
I sent you a DM on Discord with a picture that you can zoom in and everything. Maybe that's
Oh, let's try that on Discord. Where'd you put it?
in your
Oh, damn.
DMs.
Sorry. Right, the DM thing. Right. Yeah, I'm using the same thing. It's
Okay.
just the way I have it mapped out. Is it's okay. The point is, you can see a slump that dips down. I can get this here. That'll work. Yeah, you can see the mining in yellow goes down to previous points not seen. Basically, I mean, when everybody went to war out of Delve, I guess there were still some people mining because that was even a little higher than it is now. Right now, there's very little mining going on, but it's still about 1 trillion in the last month, which seems to have stabilized. See that stabilization? That's interesting to me. I wonder if people figured out how to mine with blackout. It's certainly not going up though. Well, all this needs to be torn apart, analyzed, compared. So let's go back to see if we can see anything else.
Well, we got something else to talk about. September patch notes just released.
Wow, the patch notes? Oof, big
Yeah,
day.
sent you a DM.
These DMs, you're going to have to just interrupt me. So September
yeah.
patch notes are just out. Let me grab those. Man, this is awesome.
News on top of news.
I was sitting here
It's like
complaining
happening
about,
live.
yeah, complaining there was nothing to talk about, and how I was like just lamenting being here, being the only one, being lonely, sitting here with nothing to talk about. But this is fantastic. So we have a few things that CCP has released. Thank you, CCP. They have released the security report, which shows how many accounts get banned for various things. They have shown the monthly economic report, which we looked at, and we expected numbers to drop in mining and overall production, and it has. And now we're looking at the patch notes for this month that are coming out. And the big patch notes here is under balancing, and that is the sinusoidal field generator will only work on 2 classes of ships. And then there is a separate sino that will work for industrials only and work with jump freighters only. It won't work for any other industrial ship. So no Rorqual, none of that. It's just for jump freighters. And there's also some changes that CCP just talked about, which was they've changed some things with the Venture, which was a small frigate-sized mining ship that was misused as a ship that could easily escape faction war. And so it could be used in faction war by bots to rack up certain LP points, and those are loyalty points. And basically it was used in a way that it shouldn't have been used, and so they've nerfed that, and hopefully that'll take it out of, make faction war a little more exclusive to people who are actually doing the faction fighting. Okay, but there's also graphic changes, audio changes, and we'll have to look through these here. New sound effects that go with the improved visuals of wormholes. That's right, they improved the visuals of wormholes. And so then there's going to be new sound, so look out for that. 2 new pieces of semi-procedural generated music, which is interesting for wormholes. Semi-procedurally generated music. That is interesting. These compositions are an indication of how music in wormhole space will sound in the very near future, as working on more compositions, which will be ready for the next few months. And what I think that is layering music so that whatever the wormhole's characteristics are, that you get a music that actually accompanies those different characteristics. And so as things get mixed up, the sound will get mixed up. And I think that's what procedural generated music is like. So you have different variations of music that aren't that are just kind of layered on each other and pulled out. Yes, there is music in the game. So you have the Sinode changes coming. That's the big deal. That's going to change the behavior of capital ships in the game, which is a big part of the game. Gameplay changes. Ships that bump while attempting to enter warp will now automatically enter warp if they remain in pre-warp state for more than 3 minutes, or 3 minutes continuously. Scramblers or any other form of canceling the warp will reset this timer. Okay, so if you scramble somebody, you can hold them indefinitely. And so in nullsec or in lowsec, this won't be that big an issue, because if you scram somebody, you disrupt that automatic warp in 3 minutes. Where this plays a big role is in highsec, where you can't scram someone without getting shot by the police. So in those areas where a lot of highsec ganking happens, you're going to see a 3-minute timer on that. And that's good and bad. What people used to do is just bump your ship and knock you off your warp path and hold you indefinitely. You could hold you for an hour, and they would just hold you and wait for their friends or themselves to reload, come over and kill you. And there was nothing you could do about it. You were trapped. You could have somebody break you out, help you escape, whatever, but you could not do anything as a solo pilot there. And now they have a 3-minute timer, so they've got to kill you within 3 minutes or you warp away automatically. Okay, and again, that change, that 3-minute warp, is primarily for highsec. All right, ships that bump while attempting, never mind, I just read that. The user interface for entering warp has been updated. This is interesting because it's a big change. It hasn't changed in the entire game, entire 15, 17 years of the game. The user interface for entering warp has been updated significantly to clearly display the establishing warp vector phrase before the ship fully enters warp, and to display a progress bar that indicates how close the ship is to warping. So you get to know how close you are. And that could be exciting. If you're about to be attacked and you're about to enter warp, it could create some drama. But establishing warp vector, it's a new thing that you'll see in the area where you warp. Okay, all FOF missiles, and that is friend or foe missiles, now have a maximum targeting range, which they correctly enforce when choosing a target. So I suppose there were some problems with targeting range before.
Yes, in wormholes, people were actually using those to basically aggress the whole pocket and then fly away more than 100 kilometers away.
To
But their
safety.
friend or foe missiles would carry on shooting those rats that were far away. So you could rat in perfect safety without ever losing your ship.
I see. So in wormhole space, you would come in, launch your missiles, and you don't need to target because these missiles
And
are...
you don't need to target,
Yeah. You don't need to target. You just launch them, and then you warp to safety, and the missiles do the work while you hang back in safety.
No, you don't warp to safety. You just fly away from the targets, like 100 kilometers, more than 100 kilometers away.
The rats
So
would
then they cannot
de-aggress
shoot you, but you will carry on shooting.
I see. And the rats would just sit there and get blown up.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so that fixes some of the basically risk factor problems in wormhole space. Okay, graphics. We have made improvements to our post-processing system, improving its performance and allowing more effects and scenes to use it to full advantage. Next is we improve the visuals of wormholes and suns to low shader settings. Oh, on low shader settings. The suns will no longer be a flat colored circle with the Falcon's face in the middle of it. Did you guys see that meme? That was pretty fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, the low-end graphics for wormholes and suns has been improved, and so you can visually tell characteristics of a wormhole now. I'll read that part here. What is visible in high settings? The wormholes will now display the destination system at their center. Oh, that's interesting. As they do on high settings. Okay. So really, this is just parity between low settings and high settings so far.
Mm-hmm.
But it says here, we also took the opportunity to improve the wormhole graphics on shader settings as well, on high settings as well, improving their three-dimensionality. From what I think this understates it, because from what I gathered, the pictures that they show really show you the characteristics of a wormhole before you have to analyze it or jump through it. And I think that's pretty cool. So check that out. That's another change for people who are using wormholes, and there's more and more every day.
I've always found impressive how a wormholer, when they are scanning wormholes on the Empire side or nullsec, just by looking at the wormhole and the entrance and the color, they know exactly where it's going to go even before they go into it.
Wild.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Sorry, CEP and the Caldari Navy have awarded a new construction contract to PKN Interstellar for the JITA system. And what this is the JITA Trade Hub is going to get built out graphically. So you're going to see more parts to it. I think it's going to happen over a period of time, not automatically. And you can even hear construction noises from what I'm told on the test server. So that's going to be hitting. And so you'll see JITA, the main trade hub of EVE Online, get a facelift. I don't think it gets any new powers. It's just going to look a bit bigger, more built out, and it's going to progress over time, I think. All right, on the implant front, introducing T2 low-grade implant set. I'm going to pronounce this badly, but mimesis. Now available in the DED LP store, loyalty point store near you. So there's some new implants there.
It's basically the shield slaves.
Is that the shield slaves? Oh my god!
The shield slaves. That's the shield slaves. They will introduce
not
low
shield
grade
slaves.
first.
It's not okay. Is it or is it not?
No.
That's not.
The mimesis is not shield slaves.
Yeah,
It is
Slaves
trig
are shield
weapons.
slaves.
It is
It's what?
a boost to trig weapons that lowers their cycle rate but ups the maximum damage they do.
Okay.
All right, that's good. We got that straightened out. So T2
Yeah.
low grade implant set. That's good. I hadn't actually heard of these, so I'm glad that I wasn't that off the mark. But thank you anyway, Z-Master. Appreciate it. Market. The percentage price change listed in the market ticker will now display price changes over 7 days rather than 1. Does anybody know what that means? I need to check that out.
It's good for market traders, so basically they can see, the market ticker at the bottom of the market window that sort of like shows popular items. It will show you a 7-day trending rather than a 1-day trending, so you can see sort of how the market has been behaving more generally than a surprise spike in like someone buying out all the ships or one particular item.
Let's have a look here. I have the market.
It's a sort of a net positive, I guess, for people who, for traders who generally tend to play on the weekends, kind of thing, rather than every single day. Because then that means that like that ticker will also would be beneficial to them.
So right at the bottom of your screen there, Matterall, you see that ticker scrolling along at the bottom.
Okay.
That's what's updated.
I see. And that's a minor change then, but it's by the way, something you may not know. This ticker here has you can't see it. Let me get into place here. There it is. You see that crawling ticker? That is something that you can control on your quick bar, I believe. Let's see. How do you adjust that? Reset market ticker. Well, I will figure out how you do that. Here it is. I think reset new folder. I think here there is a way to do this. I'll find out, and maybe I'll tell you Sunday when I figure it out. But I know that you can control what you see down here. You can make it so that you see the stuff that you want to see down there. Otherwise, it uses a default. Okay, back to the market notes. So that crawling ticker at the bottom of the market is not going to be a 1-day difference. It's going to be a 7-day difference. And that's a little bit softer so you can get a better feel for how things are moving rather than a dramatic price drop or increase because somebody bought everything out the day before. Modules. An added industrial Sino module can be fitted on industrials, deep space transports, and blockade runners. So that's industrials and T2 industrials. The sinusoidal field can be jumped to by jump freighters. Oh, this is interesting. And Black Ops battleships. That's not anything that I'd heard of before. So Black Ops can jump to Indy Sinos.
I'm pretty sure that was never mentioned anywhere before.
That's
No,
new, right?
That's
Definitely,
new.
that's new.
I've been following the Indie Sino a lot because I do JF stuff. There was no mention of it at all.
It wasn't even on CC. Like when we were looking at them, we couldn't.
Are they trying to create some gameplay here, or I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me why
You
a
might
Black Ops
think
ship-
it'd make it easier for boxing groups, but I mean, the T1 Indie is not very easy to get around. I guess you could use a BR, but they're not cheap.
The thing is, though, is the Blops can jump to covert sinos anyway, so bombers and recons are more viable for.
Not just that, Seraph. If anything, it makes cap super umbrellas and such actually not as bad as the original changes were going to make it. You just have an industrial on grid. You'd like the Sino, you jump the Blops or the recon.
Mhm.
Oh no, sorry, you can't do the recon in this case. That would be the Black Ops Sino. You jump the Blops to it. You'd like the Sino. You get the Blops out of there.
Yeah.
I'm 50-50
Right.
on that because the problem with that
That's
is
a lot of
an
dead
industrial.
Blops.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that. It's also an industrial is so quick to kill. You're most likely going to sunbounce before the jump completes.
Possibly, yeah,
Well,
true.
but it's still theoretically, it looks
T1
like
industrials, you can get them to like higher tank than you'd expect, especially,
especially
like,
the-
burst if you
the-
overheat stuff.
the T2 versions, right? Like the deep space transports, I think have.
That makes sense, but at that point, then you're still spending the same amount of money as a recon. So
Yeah,
True, but
typically
you have
as
something
well.
you have something that's more useful during a mining. Well, but I guess you're only going to use it as a Sino to bring in a Sino
you
to
wouldn't
bring in
keep
the
it out.
capital.
People would
This
be able
is-
to see it.
This is a very strange. This is a very strange development. Black Ops able to jump to Indy jump freighters. When you think of it, not in terms of T1 Indies, but deep space transports and blockade runners,
You also have
it's very interesting.
Yeah,
you
but I
also
mean,
you also have to understand that, like, typically when a Black Ops can, jump to a particular sino, they can also bridge to that particular sino as well. So
Yeah, so somebody asks, the capitals cannot jump to Indy Sinos. That is correct. Only a jump freighter, I guess that's a capital, can jump to. Well, it was stated that only jump freighters can jump to Indy Sinos. That's this new one, Indy Sino. But now
The
they're
only
saying Black Ops can too.
the only thing I can think of is if you have like a barge or something who can drop into an indie in like a rock wall, light the Sino on that, and jump the Blops on the top of it for the Blops to light the normal Sino. But that's so many hoops to jump through.
I can see it being basically the like a, because you get combat industrials to some degree, but essentially you can have a combat industrial, lighting a Sino, having a Black Ops bridge a force recon in, that lights another Sino that brings in caps.
also, if the industrial Sino follows the same mechanics as the normal Sino, which it really looks to because of the way the stats are made, it does last a lot longer, we know that, but it'll also like show up on the map and show up as a beacon. So it's definitely not supplanting a covert Sino for blocks work for all those reasons. Like, it may be able to bridge a blocks, but there are also a lot of other advantages a covert Sino has that this Sino does not seem to have at all.
I'm confused by it, but maybe there's some reason that I'm not thinking of. We shall see.
It's
Can't see.
chaos. I'm not sure there's reasons for anything.
I think that I wonder if that was something that was brought up as a way to increase gameplay, but it certainly doesn't make sense why the Black Ops would, and why the Black Ops would, and other ships that are stealth bombers like can't, recon ships or whatever, can't jump to those. I don't know. I think it's just in a way of increasing gameplay.
Part of gameplay design doesn't have to technically make sense so long as it feels balanced or feels like the gameplay that it creates or curtails feels balanced. Like not all gameplay changes have to be logical to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Although it helps, clearly it does help because
Yeah,
then
but
people understand the sort of like the mentality, but
no, this
the
is the problem I've had with game design. There's a tension between, hey, playability, we want to play this game and have fun at it, and virtual world, everything makes sense in this virtual world, and that just doesn't make sense in a virtual setting. Not just a role playing setting, but just in the world. It doesn't make it. There would need to be a reason for that, and maybe they can make it up with some kind of lore explanation, but it looks to me like they were like, we need additional gameplay, so let's make this loophole and see what happens with it and experiment. And maybe that's part of it. It's part of the experiment. But anyway, we'll move on. Data and Relic analyzer modules can no longer auto repeat. Since auto repeat is mostly always an incorrect choice for those modules. So that looks more like a don't waste your time leaving this on auto. But if there was ever any AFK play with it, which doesn't look like there was, at least there's no indication of it, then that's no longer the case. You have to be there to push the button. Removed all overheat options for modules. For module right click menu if you do not have a thermodynamics trained skill. In other words, you can't even attempt to overheat if you don't have the skill. Okay, missions and NPC. Venture's no longer able to capture faction warfare complexes. That's the faction war problem we were talking about, where the Ventures were being used there. And they're not warships, they're mining ships. They're just being misused. So they fixed that. Next, the Triglavian Collective are proceeding to exert their influence in new areas of New Eden. You might have seen them, by the way, in HiSec. Systems located in low-sec security regions have reported the presence of invading Triglavian forces. And this says Triglavian invasion is being expanded to low-sec. Am I wrong? That's a big deal.
I believe that's true, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I think there were hints of that, and it seems true. So that will be coming this next week. Science and Industry added Blueprint for Indie Sinos because they're new. Ships added 50% bonus Sino field duration for Black Ops ships. What was it before? 3 minutes? Or 1 minute?
10.
It was 10 minutes.
Regular sign was 10, and then you had a 50% reduction on some
Oh, I
ships.
see.
And now the Blobs has that as well.
Recon had 75%, I think it was, wasn't it?
I remember it was
No,
like
I thought
Recons
Recon
was
was still
50.
just 50%.
Yeah, Recons were 50.
well, they have faster cycles, so they can get out of that compromised position quickly. When you light a Sino, you are compromised, you can't move. And so the bonus gets you out of that situation quicker. Skills. New characters no longer start with thermodynamics skill, automatically trained. This change has been made so that new players can choose when to begin engaging with the higher complexity of overloading their modules rather than having the system pushed on them immediately.
I kind of feel like this is a quality of life theme because I think it's considering where the overheat kind of button is on a module. It's entirely possible for new players to accidentally click that when they're just generally trying to click a module online. And when they're not used to or don't understand the overheat module, it may be a significant surprise to them, probably in a very negative way, when suddenly their entire rack like overheats and dies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably a quality of life change for them in that regard.
With that said, I've actually seen a couple alphas asking that question in help chat. Why are my modules broken? How can I fix them?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one new player change. They're basically not saying don't get involved. They're basically saying to new players, don't bother getting involved into this advanced play yet. You'll get there. Don't do it right away. Whereas before, I think it was CCP saying, here's a skill that'll make you get right into PvP combat quicker. And I think that was part of that funnel. And so they're pulling back on that a little bit, which I think is wise. Let people get acclimated, and then they can decide if they even want to PvP in that way. Text descriptions, rename the medical clone location to home station. That makes more sense. Again, this is stuff to make it easier for new players. User interface changes, returned wallet button to the default Neocon layout. So for a while it was hidden under a submenu. Now it's back on the main menu. The settled system tab for NPC corporations has been improved to more clearly show their nearest station. Added a buy all option to a kill report window. So I believe that means if you get killed, a window pops up that shows the kill report, basically shows all the stuff that you had, and you can immediately just buy it all again. And that gets you right back into a ship, and that's good for new players because they get killed and they have no avenue to get back into the ship they were just in. And so this is, I believe, built for that.
You can still do it. Essentially, it's just like a two-step process.
So they made it a one-step process.
Yeah, you go to the kill, you simulate the kill, then you can buy all from the simulation screen.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a bit pain.
I see. Yeah, but this makes it easier so that people can get right back into the ship they were in, and that helps them not get so interrupted in the game. And so maybe that was a pain point where a player has a ship, they like their ship, they get killed in it, and to get back into that ship is too hard because they forgot what all the pieces were, all that stuff. And it takes them longer, and that is a possibility for them to say, I give up. And so that kind of allays that a bit. Okay, added skills on demand in tooltips on items in the fitting window. That's a nice improvement. When attempting to repackage multiple items, if at least one of them is a container, a special warning will be shown. That's good because I think people used to repackage, just grab a group of things and repackage it, and inside there would be this container that contained 1,000 things. And so as soon as you did that move without any warning, you would get the 30 things that you repackaged, and then you would get the contents of that container dumped. All those thousands of things would be dumped into your hold, and that was a big pain. New button style for action buttons in the info panel. Look out for that. Okay, new player experience. Update the UI for the tutorial page in the agency. That's the window that helps new players find things, and advanced players, really. Tutorial operations can no longer be repeated. I guess they turn it off to show that you've done it. Removed an instruction during the tutorial to stop the player's ship. Okay, and then we get into fixes, and there are probably some interesting stuff in the fixes, but those are the features that are coming, and that is the end of patch notes that we're going to cover now. What I'm going to do is something a little special. Since this is a big day, we have the security report, we have the monthly economic report, and patch notes come out. I'm going to open a mic for you guys, and I want you guys, if you want to talk about some of the things that are most impressive or interesting to you for the next 15 minutes. I'm going to go off screen and get ready for my day. So let's have 15 minutes of open floor for you guys.
Oh God, what could possibly go wrong?
Right.
I'll be monitoring. I just won't be on screen.
Okay, so
Okay.
while we are finishing talking about the patch notes, just an FYI, these changes are coming the 10th of September, this coming Tuesday at downtime, and they predict the downtime to last up to 30 minutes. So they.
I mean, I was
Who's
kind
ready
of
for
shocked.
universe in the can, boys?
I was kind of shocked how fast they're implementing the signer changes. To be fair, personally.
Well, is there anything in the MER yet that you guys have been looking at? Anything that points to where we are?
MER is fun.
What's that?
The MER is fun. Oh boy.
Tell us about that. What are you seeing?
Okay, so bounties got completely stomped. Mining got completely stomped. everything except for Delve basically got completely stomped, and even Delve didn't come out unscathed, just like quite a bit less scathed. Pretty much all of nullsec, most of the nullsec income sources have taken huge beatings, like ranging from like halves to quarterings. It's like complete devastation.
Oh, is that a good thing?
Depends on perspective.
So they really turned off. I mean, they made the environment untenable for that kind of massive money making.
Yeah, it's been quite interesting to see
Nullsec
how.
bounties went from 56 trillion to 28 trillion last month to this month.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty significant.
Mining went from 40 to 14.
Yeah, that is. I mean, yeah. I mean, significant isn't the word, really, right?
I mean, let's be honest, it was really expected, right? I mean, before you could simply mine or rat in perfect safety, you would know exactly when the enemy was in system, you would know exactly where and when they were coming from, and then all of a sudden, poof, there's no local. All of a sudden, you can no longer, mine with your 10 rorquals, you can no longer use your excavators, you can no longer rat in perfect safety in your super carrier and so on and so forth. So all this was expected. We already knew this was going to happen the moment they
Well,
announced the blackout.
I would say that, to be fair, depending on your backup, you could still rat and mine so long as you had the EHP to survive until your backup arrived. The thing that took a beating was really the people who couldn't, rat in super carriers with effective, backup.
Yeah, but that's what we've been saying for months. The Imperium was prepared. The rest of Eve wasn't. And the MER shows it, right? That's what Nero was saying. The 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 entirety of Eve got wrecked in money making, but the Imperium, they still survived and they are still doing it. Yes, they got a small hit, obviously, but they are in a better shape than all other coalitions. And all of this because of how they manage their community, they manage their
Yeah.
or quote unquote the umbrella, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, NC and PL and basically Pan Fam kind of thing are in the midst of setting up and hardening their own version of that, their own umbrella in the drone region. So like that is likely to increase in terms of ratting and mining amounts in the months to come. So you're going to see a pickup there as well. But other than that, like,
Ah, of course.
okay.
What's up, Seraph? You got an open mic, by the way, brother.
Why did you just yell in my ear? That was loud.
I don't
Seraph,
think he's
you got an
realised
open
it's
mic, dude.
got it left
I
on.
think we're all a bit perplexed.
Yeah, let me.
Seraph doesn't realize you have an open mic. I'm going to mute him then.
I just muted him.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Sounded like something
Yeah.
exciting was happening there, but oh my god, my ears.
He was probably playing
He-
another game.
All right, so it doesn't sound like we have much to talk about anymore, but all this information will need to be gone through, and we will be talking about it this weekend when we bring on Exuki Vili Ashtarothi, and now we'll probably bring on a financial guy to talk about the MER. We'll talk about security report, but most importantly, we'll talk about the CSM summit and what was discussed there. We can't actually know what was discussed there, but we can find out the nature of things and how they feel about it, that sort of stuff.
I think the faction warfare kind of grouping are going to be rejoicing at the fact that the venture issue has been removed, but they're probably kind of going, well, what's the next one going to be?
Mm. I mean, they seem to have much more elaborate plans than that. If you sort of read their write-ups and go on their Discord, well, it's a start at least.
Yeah.
Well, I think they dealt with it even more severely than they were talking earlier. They were saying, hey, these warp core stabilizers, these stabs that let you get away, need to be nerfed or not being able to be put on these ships. And instead, they just said, nope, that ship won't even work at all in any situation on these faction war things.
But that's
Yeah,
how it
because
should be,
the
right?
thing
There's
with
basically no
Yes.
legitimate use of these other than just being a pain in the ass and or a bot.
Well,
Yeah, they've
yeah.
no need to be in those sites in any way, shape, or form. Like, they're a beginner, a new player mining ship. Like,
Well, we have a ton to read. There's a lot of conversation inside of TIS Public, which I enjoy because that's where you can see points of view from all over EVE Online come into contact with one another and talk about their points of view on some of these changes and some of the stuff that's been reported through the MER and the SER. So check that out. That is Talking in Stations Public. You can get to it at talkinginstations.com. Initial reactions. Let's see what's going on in there. But we will wrap it up here and see
remember to
you.
like, subscribe, and comment.
Yeah, we need to. Here's the reality. Here's the reality. We run on fumes. We need people. we need people to basically. Seriously, if you look at iTunes and you look up if you look up EVE Online, Talking in Stations won't even show up. So we need you guys, you guys that listen to the podcast or watch these things, to go to iTunes and like Talking in Stations, get us over 100, and then maybe when somebody types in EVE Online, it'll show up. There's been a lot of really generous and very nice comments about the show there. So if you feel like adding to those, that would be great too, because our staff reads that, and I post that in our internal channels. And we need subscribers, and we need followers on YouTube, on Twitch, and of course on wherever you listen to your podcast. If you could recommend us, that would be great. All that stuff really helps the awareness. It's been 3 years. It's been a long, slow increase day after day after day after day. We'd like to keep it going. So please help us and help our visibility in any way you can that way. And we're just...
And we'd like to thank everyone who has been doing that. Like, you guys have been awesome.
Yeah, Apollo and Hoffman X have been doing amazing battle, rewarding us through Twitch.
Battles.
Yeah, they have support battles, which are great. We love being the beneficiary of that. And we also have...
Actually, I wanted to say something about that.
Sure.
Like, I think there's a thing that Twitch is doing at the moment called September. So basically, if you want to subscribe, it's 50% off. It's a thing that Twitch is doing at the moment for this month. So subscriptions, I believe, are 50% off, and also gifting subscriptions are 50% off as well. So
fantastic. We really would like to see you guys support the shows. Again, we're sending some of the money this year has gone to sending a few people to eVegas and helping them out. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to make it. And so that's going to allow us to have people on the ground there at eVegas. And we would like to do the same for other conventions as well in the future. Apart from that, the money is used to buy all the equipment that we need and to help different shows improve. You can probably see that they've been improving. Except me. I've decided that I'm going to fire myself and replace myself with Carneros, who is a much better host at keeping us on track. So the weak link will finally be removed from TIS, but I will be around because I still have all the keys. All right.
Well,
Thanks, everyone.
Anybody would call you a weak link, but anyway.
All right, guys. Thanks for hanging around this morning. We will see you on Sunday for Talking in Stations.